He only has 1 year left to live. Will he tell the man he loves before it's too late? Gay love story. Hello everyone, and welcome back. If you enjoy emotional gay love stories with romance, powerful twists, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love seeing viewers from all over the world. Thank you for being here. Now let's dive into today's story. The doctor told me I had a year left to live, and somehow the first thing I thought was, great. Now I have a deadline for telling Luke Bennett I've been in love with him for almost 10 years. Ryan Mitchell sat behind the wheel of his aging Subaru in the hospital parking garage, staring at the folded sheet of paper resting on the passenger seat like it had personally insulted him. 12 months. Maybe more. Maybe less. Medicine, apparently, had decided to become aggressively vague at the worst possible moment. Outside, Seattle rain tapped against the windshield, soft and persistent, turning the concrete garage into a watercolor of gray light and red brake lamps. Ryan hadn't cried in the doctor's office. He hadn't cried in the elevator. He hadn't even cried when the receptionist smiled gently and told him to have a good afternoon, which felt like an objectively ridiculous thing to say to someone carrying a 12-month prognosis in his jacket pocket. Instead, he nodded, walked to his car, locked the doors, and sat there for 23 minutes pretending he was waiting for the rain to stop. He wasn't. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Luke Bennett flashed across the screen. Ryan stared at the name until the vibration stopped. 3 seconds later, a message appeared. Pizza tonight? Ryan laughed once, quietly, because of course Luke was asking about pizza, while Ryan's entire future had just been reduced to a calendar. Another message arrived. You alive? Ryan looked at the hospital paperwork. Questionable choice of words, Bennett. His thumb hovered over the screen. He could call. He could tell him everything right now. Luke, I'm sick. Luke, I'm scared. Luke, there's something else I've been too much of a coward to say for almost a decade. Instead, Ryan typed, yeah, pizza sounds good. Cowardice, he decided, was remarkably efficient. By 7, Luke was standing in Ryan's kitchen holding a large pepperoni pizza and complaining that Ryan owned exactly one usable plate. He looked painfully normal in a navy rain jacket, dark hair still damp, sleeves pushed halfway up his forearms. Ryan hated how comforting the sight was. You look terrible, Luke said. Thank you. I've been working on it. Luke narrowed his eyes. Seriously, you okay? There it was. An opening wide enough to drive a truck through. Ryan smiled. Just tired. Luke studied him for 1 second too long, then accepted the lie because Ryan had spent years teaching him how. They ate on the couch while some terrible home renovation show played unnoticed. Ryan barely tasted anything. He kept watching Luke instead, the familiar crease beside his mouth when he laughed, the way he stole Ryan's napkins without asking, the unconscious little tap of his fingers against his knee. Ordinary things. Suddenly priceless things. Then Luke muted the television. So, he said, and something in his expression changed. I got the Chicago offer. Ryan's stomach dropped. Luke smiled nervously. They want me there in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Ryan had walked into the apartment believing he had 365 days to find his courage. Apparently, the universe had just revised the deadline. Ryan stared at Luke as if Chicago were not a city, but a personal betrayal invented sometime during dinner. 6 weeks. 42 days. He had spent the last 3 hours trying to understand how 12 months could feel impossibly short, and now 12 months sounded almost generous. That is great, Ryan said, because apparently his mouth had joined a conspiracy against him. Luke leaned back against the couch. You said that like somebody reading a hostage note. I am happy for you. Worse. Ryan grabbed another slice of pizza despite having no appetite. What do you want from me, Bennett? Confetti? I have no confetti. I barely have plates. Luke laughed, but his eyes stayed thoughtful. I have not accepted it. Yet. Ryan looked up. Why not? Luke shrugged. Seattle is home. My friends are here. My work is here. A pause. You are here. 3 ordinary words. Ryan felt every one of them. He looked down before his face could betray him. Chicago has pizza too. That is your argument. I am trying to support your professional development. By replacing yourself with deep dish pizza? I have always believed I was replaceable by carbohydrates. Luke laughed again, and Ryan stored the sound somewhere private. He had started doing that since leaving the hospital, collecting things. Luke's laugh. Rain against the windows. The smell of coffee from the shop downstairs. Tiny pieces of a life he had never realized he could lose. Later, after Luke went home, Ryan stood alone in his kitchen and opened the junk drawer. Beneath batteries, takeout menus, and 3 pens that probably did not work, he found a small black notebook. He carried it to the table. The first page remained blank for nearly 10 minutes. Then he wrote, 12 things before 30. It was a lie, technically. His 30th birthday was 9 months away, but 12 things before I possibly die felt unnecessarily dramatic. Number 1. Photograph the sunrise from Ruby Beach. Number 2. Take a road trip without planning every stop. Number 3. See a baseball game from ridiculously good seats. Number 4. Spend one entire day without checking my email. He paused. Number 5. Tell someone the truth. Ryan stared at that sentence, then closed the notebook. The next morning, Luke arrived without warning, carrying 2 coffees and using the spare key Ryan had given him years ago. You know doors usually come with knocking, Ryan called from the bathroom. You know friends usually answer texts. By the time Ryan entered the kitchen, Luke had already found the notebook. 12 things before 30. Luke read aloud. Ryan nearly dropped his coffee. That is private. It was underneath my cup. Then my cup has violated my privacy. Luke flipped through the pages, smiling. Ruby Beach? Baseball? A road trip? Since when do you have a bucket list? Ryan forced a shrug. Since yesterday. Luke looked at him with that irritatingly observant expression again. Why? Ryan took the notebook from his hands. Maybe I realized I have been postponing too much. That answer was dangerously close to honest. Luke grew quiet, then reached for the pen. What are you doing? Improving it. He wrote something on the final page, snapped the notebook shut, and handed it back. Ryan opened it immediately. The new entry simply read, number 13. Ryan frowned. There are only supposed to be 12. I know. What is number 13? Luke picked up his coffee and headed toward the door with a smile Ryan had known for almost 10 years and somehow still could not defend himself against. You will find out when we finish the first 12. Ryan watched him leave, then looked down at the notebook. For the first time since the hospital, the future did not look like a countdown. It looked like a list. 3 days later, Luke called at 5:30 in the morning and said, "Get dressed. Wear something warm." Ryan opened one eye and stared at his phone. I would like to remind you that friendship has legal limits. Ruby Beach. Sunrise. Number 1. Ryan sat up. Luke, Ruby Beach is almost 4 hours away. Then you should stop talking and start putting on pants. By 6:15, they were heading west in Luke's silver SUV with 2 travel mugs of coffee, a bag of gas station snacks, and Ryan's camera resting between his feet. The sky was still black when Seattle disappeared behind them. Ryan should have been exhausted. Instead, he felt strangely awake. Luke drove with one hand on the wheel, humming badly to an old song on the radio. Ryan lifted his camera. Click. Luke glanced over. Did you just photograph me? No. I heard the shutter. Could have been anything. Inside my car. Mechanical squirrel. Luke shook his head. You are impossible. Ryan smiled and looked through the photograph. Luke was slightly blurred, caught between streetlights, smiling without knowing he was smiling. Ryan saved it. He had been photographing Luke for years without admitting what he was really doing. Birthdays, coffee shops, camping trips, Sunday mornings after too little sleep. Luke existed across thousands of images, while Ryan appeared in almost none. At Ruby Beach, cold wind came off the Pacific hard enough to make Ryan regret every decision that had brought him there. They walked across the sand while the horizon slowly changed from charcoal to pale gold. Luke shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. Worth waking up before civilization. Ryan raised his camera toward the ocean. Ask me when I can feel my fingers again. Luke laughed. Ryan photographed him against the morning light. Click. Another one for the collection. Your turn, Luke said. Ryan lowered the camera. Absolutely not. Luke pulled out his phone. You have taken approximately 700 pictures of me since we got here. 9. That somehow makes it stranger. Ryan turned away, but Luke stepped around him and lifted the phone. Come on. One picture. I belong behind cameras. Why? Ryan almost answered honestly. Because photographs survive people. Because he wanted Luke to have memories of beautiful places without being forced to look at the man who would eventually disappear from them. Instead, he said, my face is hostile to natural lighting. Luke stared at him. That is the dumbest thing you have said this week. And on Tuesday you claimed cereal counts as soup. Before Ryan could escape, Luke snapped the picture. Delete it. Never. Bennett. Mitchell. Ryan tried to look annoyed, but Luke was grinning, and suddenly Ryan was laughing too, standing on a freezing Washington beach while the sun climbed over the horizon. For several minutes, 12 months did not exist. Chicago did not exist. There was only wind, coffee, Luke, and light. On the drive home, Luke broke the comfortable silence. I have been thinking about Chicago. Ryan's fingers tightened around the camera strap. And I might turn it down. Ryan looked at him. Luke kept his eyes on the highway. There are things here I am not sure I am ready to leave. Ryan's heart did something hopeful and terrible at the same time. That evening, alone in his apartment, he opened the notebook and crossed out number 1. Then he looked at number 5. Tell someone the truth. His phone buzzed with a photograph from Luke. Ryan on. Ruby Beach, laughing into the wind. Under it was a message. Proof you were actually there. Ryan stared at his own smiling face for a long time. Then he closed the notebook without crossing out anything else. Ryan spent the next week doing something he had always considered impossible, trying to convince the man he loved to move 2,000 miles away. Chicago has excellent architecture, Ryan said over coffee on Saturday morning. Luke stared at him across the tiny table by the window. I am an architect. I am aware. Great museums. Also aware. Hot dogs with an alarming number of toppings. Ryan. Deep dish pizza. You already used pizza. Ryan lifted his mug. Strong arguments deserve repetition. Luke did not smile this time. Rain traced slow lines down the coffee shop window while people moved along the sidewalk outside under umbrellas. Luke leaned back and studied him with the same expression that had been making Ryan nervous for days. Why are you suddenly campaigning for Chicago? Ryan looked down at his coffee. Because if you stay, you might build your future around me. Because I might not be part of that future. Because loving you has apparently turned me into someone willing to break my own heart on purpose. Because it is a good opportunity, Ryan said. Luke's jaw tightened slightly. Last week you looked like I had announced I was moving to Mars. Mars has worse public transportation. There. That. Luke pointed at him. You make a joke every time I ask you something real. Ryan went still. Luke lowered his voice. Something has been different since that hospital appointment. Ryan's fingers tightened around the mug. It was routine. You never said it was a hospital appointment. Silence settled between them. Ryan had made a mistake. Small. Stupid. Dangerous. Luke watched him carefully. What is going on? Nothing. Ryan. I said nothing. Luke looked hurt, and somehow that was worse than suspicion. Fine. He stood and pulled on his jacket. If you do not want to tell me, I cannot make you. Ryan wanted to stop him. Instead, he watched Luke walk out into the rain. 2 days passed without a call. Then 3. Ryan crossed number 3. Off the list alone after buying absurdly expensive seats for a Mariners game they had planned to attend together. But he could not bring himself to go. On Thursday evening, Luke finally appeared at Ryan's apartment. He did not bring pizza. That felt serious. I accepted Chicago, Luke said. Ryan forgot how to breathe for half a second. You did. You were right. It is a good opportunity. Luke smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I leave in 5 weeks. Ryan forced his face into something resembling happiness. Congratulations. Luke nodded. Thanks. Neither moved. There were 1,000 things Ryan could have said. Stay? I lied. I am scared. I love you. Instead, he reached forward and gave Luke a quick hug. Luke hesitated before returning it. For one quiet second, Ryan rested his cheek against Luke's shoulder and memorized the familiar warmth of his oldest friend. Then he stepped away first. You are going to be great, Ryan said. Luke looked at him as if waiting for something more. Nothing came. Good night, Ryan. The door closed softly behind him. Ryan stood there until the apartment felt too quiet. Then his phone vibrated. A reminder filled the screen. Oncology follow-up. Monday, 9:30 in the morning. Ryan dismissed it immediately. On the table, the black notebook was still open. Number 5 waited in his handwriting. Tell someone the truth. Ryan picked up his pen, stared at the words, and wrote one sentence beneath them. Not if the truth makes him stay. Luke had 5 weeks left in Seattle, and Ryan discovered that knowing the exact date someone would leave made ordinary moments feel suspiciously important. A Tuesday coffee became one of their last Tuesday coffees. A drive downtown became one of their last drives through familiar streets. Even Luke complaining about Ryan leaving wet towels on the bathroom floor during a visit suddenly sounded like something Ryan wanted to record. So when Luke texted on Saturday asking if Ryan needed help cleaning his photography studio, Ryan said yes before remembering that Luke Bennett had the organizational instincts of a federal investigator. "Why do you own 17 empty camera boxes?" Luke asked, kneeling beside a stack near the window. "Investment portfolio. They are cardboard. Diversified cardboard." Luke shook his head and reached behind an old storage cabinet. "What about this?" Ryan turned. Luke was holding a photograph. Not just any photograph. That photograph. Ryan crossed the room too quickly. "Give me that." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Now I definitely want to see it." "Luke." Something in Ryan's voice made him stop joking. He looked down. The photograph showed Luke at 22, sitting outside a tiny diner near the University of Washington, laughing with his head tilted back. His hair was longer then. His jacket was terrible. Ryan remembered both facts with painful clarity. "You took this?" Luke asked. "A long time ago." Luke smiled faintly. "I remember that diner." Ryan remembered everything. It had been October. They had been broke, exhausted, and surviving on diner coffee because refills were free. Luke had spent 20 minutes trying to convince Ryan that becoming a professional photographer was not an irresponsible life choice. Nobody else had believed in him yet. Luke had. Ryan remembered lifting his camera and seeing Luke through the viewfinder, sunlight catching the edge of his face, and realizing with terrifying simplicity that friendship was no longer the whole truth. Luke turned the photograph over. Ryan's stomach dropped. Written across the back in faded black ink were 7 words. "The first day I knew." Luke looked up. "Knew what?" Ryan reached for the photograph. Luke held it for another second, waiting. "That your jacket was ugly." Luke blinked. "Seriously?" "Historically ugly." Ryan took the photograph and slid it into a drawer. "You kept photographic evidence for 8 years?" "I am committed to documenting tragedy." Luke laughed, but his gaze lingered on Ryan. "You are weird lately." "I have always been weird." "Not like this." Ryan busied himself with a box of old prints. Luke stepped closer, not touching him. "Sometimes I feel like you are saying goodbye without actually saying goodbye." The words landed so precisely that Ryan stopped moving. For one reckless second, he wanted to tell him everything. Instead, he forced a smile. "You are the one moving to Chicago." Luke's expression closed slightly. "Right." That evening, after Luke left, Ryan opened the drawer and held the old photograph under the desk lamp. 8 years ago, he had written those words because he assumed someday he would finish the sentence. Someday had always seemed endless. Ryan found a small wooden box in the closet and placed the photograph inside. Then he took out 12 envelopes. On the first, he wrote Luke's name. On the second, he wrote "Open when you miss Seattle." On the third, "Open when you need someone to remind you who you are." He stopped at the fourth because his vision had blurred. Ryan pressed his palms against his eyes and laughed softly at himself. "Fantastic. Now we are writing emotional mail like a 19th century widow." His phone buzzed. A message from Luke appeared. "Found number 6 for the list. Road trip next weekend. No excuses." Ryan looked at the envelopes, then at Luke's message. 5 weeks suddenly felt even shorter. He placed the envelopes inside the box and closed the lid. On top, after hesitating for a long moment, he wrote 4 words he hoped Luke would not read for years. "For Luke, after I am gone." The road trip was supposed to make Ryan forget about clocks. Instead, every mile seemed to remind him that Luke was leaving in 4 weeks. They drove east toward the mountains before sunrise, following no real plan beyond Luke declaring that a road trip with reservations was simply commuting with snacks. By noon, they had stopped at a roadside diner, wandered through a tiny antique store, and argued for 15 minutes about whether a 6-foot wooden bear counted as acceptable apartment decor. "Chicago apartment," Ryan corrected when Luke suggested buying it. Luke's smile faded for half a second. "Right. Chicago." Ryan hated himself immediately. They kept driving. By late afternoon, the mountains rose around them beneath a pale blue sky, and Luke pulled into a scenic overlook. Ryan climbed out with his camera, while Luke carried 2 coffees from the last gas station. "Number 6, Luke announced. "Unplanned road trip. Completed." Ryan opened the black notebook on the hood of the SUV and crossed it out. More than half the list was finished now. Ruby Beach. The baseball game they had eventually rescheduled. A ferry ride at sunset. Breakfast at midnight. An entire day without email, which Ryan considered his greatest personal achievement. Luke leaned beside him. We are getting dangerously close. To what? Number 13. Ryan glanced at him. You still refuse to tell me? That would ruin it. Luke tapped the page. But first, number 5. Ryan's smile disappeared. Tell someone the truth. The mountain air suddenly felt colder. We can skip that one. That violates bucket list law. There is bucket list law. Very strict. Federal offense. Ryan closed the notebook. Then arrest me. Luke did not laugh. Ryan, what are you hiding? There it was again. No escape route. No joke large enough to cover it. Ryan looked toward the distant tree line. Everybody hides things. Not from me. The softness in Luke's voice made it worse. Ryan swallowed. Maybe especially from you. Luke went quiet. Why? Because you would stay. Because you would give up Chicago. Because every time you looked at me, I would wonder whether it was love or pity. Ryan forced himself to meet Luke's eyes. Because not everything needs to become your responsibility. Luke stared at him as if Ryan had spoken in another language. Is that what you think you are to me? A responsibility? That is not what I meant. Then tell me what you meant. Ryan could not. Luke looked away first. You know what? Forget it. The drive back to Seattle was painfully quiet. 2 days later, Ryan finished the 12 envelopes. Some contained photographs. Some contained memories. One contained directions to the diner where Luke had convinced him not to abandon photography. The 12th remained nearly empty because Ryan could not decide what words belonged at the end of a life. Luke's departure date moved closer. 3 weeks. Ryan placed the envelopes inside the wooden box and pushed it behind several equipment cases at the studio. He planned to give the key to his attorney later. Luke would receive the box eventually, just not yet. On their final Sunday before Luke began packing, they completed number 11 by watching sunrise from the rooftop of Ryan's apartment building with terrible coffee and 2 folding chairs. Luke opened the notebook afterward. Only number 5 and number 12 remained unfinished. What is number 12? Luke asked. Ryan took the pen and wrote slowly. Take one photograph worth keeping forever. Luke read it, then looked at him. And number 5? Ryan closed the notebook. Not today. Luke's expression tightened. You keep saying that. I know. Eventually, you run out of not todays. Ryan felt the words settle somewhere deep. Luke stood and carried his chair toward the stairwell. Ryan watched him go, unable to move. For once, Luke had no idea how right he was. Luke was supposed to spend Saturday packing, which was why Ryan did not expect to see his silver SUV outside the photography studio shortly after noon. Luke had left a portfolio there during their cleanup, a thick black folder containing sketches he needed for Chicago. He still had the spare studio key. Normally, he would have texted Ryan before entering. Normally, Ryan would have answered. That morning, however, Ryan had ignored 3 messages because he was sitting in an oncology clinic trying to make jokes while his doctor explained that his latest test results were concerning enough to require closer monitoring. By the time Luke stepped into the studio, the place was empty. Ryan. Silence. Luke found the portfolio beside the desk exactly where he remembered leaving it. He should have taken it and gone home. Instead, he noticed Ryan's old camera bag on the floor and remembered the photograph from 8 years earlier. The first day I knew. The sentence had bothered him ever since. Luke looked toward the drawer where Ryan had hidden it, then shook his head. Not your business, Bennett. He turned to leave and bumped an equipment case with his shoe. Something shifted behind it. A small wooden box slid partly into view. Luke crouched and pulled it free. His expression changed immediately. For words were written across the top in Ryan's handwriting. For Luke, after I am gone. Luke stopped breathing. What? He opened the box. 12 envelopes sat inside. His name appeared. On the first, another said, open when you miss Seattle. Another, open when you need someone to remind you who you are. Beneath them lay photographs spanning nearly a decade of their friendship. Luke laughing at the diner. Luke asleep during a ferry ride. Luke holding 2 coffees outside Ryan's first gallery show. Luke standing on Ruby Beach beneath a gold morning sky. He was everywhere. Ryan was almost nowhere. At the bottom sat a hospital envelope. Luke stared at it for several seconds before opening it. Appointment summaries. Treatment notes. Dates. Words he had never wanted to associate with Ryan. Then he found the prognosis. Approximately 12 months. Luke sat down hard in Ryan's desk chair. The studio suddenly felt enormous and empty. Every strange moment rearranged itself in his mind. The hospital appointment. The bucket list. Ryan pushing Chicago. The jokes. The distance. Not everything needs to become your responsibility. You idiot, Luke whispered, but his voice broke on the final word. His phone rang. Unknown number. Luke almost ignored it. Then he answered. Hello. Is this Luke Bennett? You are listed as Ryan Mitchell's emergency contact. Luke stood so quickly the chair rolled backward. The woman explained that Ryan had become unwell after his appointment and was being kept at the hospital for observation. He was stable. He was awake. There was no immediate emergency. Luke heard those words, but his eyes remained fixed on the wooden box. I am coming. He gathered the papers, then stopped. The old diner photograph was tucked beneath the final envelope. Luke turned it over again. The first day I knew. This time, the words felt different. He remembered that day too. Ryan behind his camera. Ryan smiling when Luke told him he was talented enough to make photography his life. Ryan looking at him afterward with an expression Luke had noticed but never understood. Luke closed his eyes. Oh, Ryan. 20 minutes later, he was walking through the hospital corridor with the wooden box held against his chest. Outside Ryan's room, Luke stopped. Through the narrow window, he could see Ryan sitting upright in bed, pale and tired, arguing cheerfully with a nurse about hospital coffee. Even now, he was joking. Even now, he was pretending. Luke looked down at the words on the box one last time. For Luke, after I am gone. Then he opened the door. Ryan looked up. His smile vanished. His gaze dropped to the box in Luke's hands. And for the first time in almost 10 years, Ryan Mitchell had absolutely nothing to hide behind. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Ryan looked at the wooden box in Luke's hands, then at Luke's face, and somehow the hospital room became quieter than any place Ryan had ever been. So, Ryan said finally, I assume you were not supposed to find that. Luke set the box carefully on the chair beside the bed. That is what you have. Ryan tried to smile. Technically, I also have terrible hospital coffee. Ryan. The smile disappeared. Luke pulled the prognosis papers from the box. How long have you known? A few weeks. Luke stared at him. A few weeks. Luke, I can explain. You had 12 months, and you decided I did not deserve 12 minutes of honesty. Ryan flinched. Luke immediately softened, but the hurt remained in his eyes. Why did you not tell me? Ryan looked toward the rain streaking the hospital window. Because you would have stayed. You do not know that. Yes, I do. Ryan swallowed. You would have turned down Chicago. You would have rearranged your life. You would have started watching me every time I looked tired. Every good day would become a medical report, and every bad day would scare you. I did not want that. Luke stepped closer. You did not want that, or you did not want me to have a choice. Ryan had no answer. Luke sat beside the bed. His anger was gone now, replaced by something quieter and more painful. You do not get to decide what you mean to me. Ryan looked down at his hands. I was scared. It was the first time he had said it aloud. No joke. No clever escape. Just the truth. I am scared that if you stay, I will spend whatever time I have wondering whether you are here because you want me or because you feel sorry for me. Luke reached into the box and removed the old diner photograph. Then answer something. He turned it over. The first day I knew. What did you know? Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Of all the truths he had prepared to avoid, this was the one that frightened him most. Luke, please. Ryan looked at the photograph. 8 years collapsed into one image. Bad coffee, Luke's terrible jacket, sunlight through a diner window, and the exact second Ryan's life had quietly changed. That I loved you. Luke went completely still. Ryan continued before courage could abandon him. I loved you that day. I loved you when you helped me open my first studio. I loved you every Sunday you showed up with coffee. I loved you at Ruby Beach. I loved you when you told me about Chicago, which made being supportive extremely inconvenient. Luke gave a broken little laugh. Ryan's eyes burned. I did not tell you because I thought there would always be another year, another birthday, another stupid pizza night. Then suddenly there might not be. Luke looked down at the photograph for a long moment. 8 years. Almost. Ryan Mitchell, you are an unbelievable idiot. Ryan blinked. That is your response. Luke laughed through wet eyes. No. My response is that we wasted a lot of time. Ryan's breath caught. Luke reached across the space between them and took his hand. Simple. Warm. Familiar. Different. So stop wasting what is left. Ryan stared at their joined hands. What about Chicago? Luke shook his head. Chicago is my decision, not yours. And I am not making it tonight. His thumb brushed gently across Ryan's knuckles. Tonight, I am staying because I want to. Ryan searched his face, still afraid to trust what he was hearing. Because I am sick? Luke's expression tightened. No, because I have spent years finding reasons to be wherever you are, and apparently both of us are idiots. Ryan let out a shaky laugh. Luke leaned closer, slowly enough to give him every chance to pull away. Tell me to stop. Ryan's heart pounded. I think I have wasted enough time. Luke kissed him. It was gentle at first, almost careful, the kind of kiss that carried years of questions inside it. Ryan froze for half a heartbeat, stunned by the simple reality of Luke's lips against his, then squeezed Luke's hand and kissed him back. Nothing about it felt like pity. It felt familiar and impossible at once, like discovering that home had been standing beside him all along. When they separated, Luke rested his forehead lightly against Ryan's. Ryan's eyes stayed closed. You know, he whispered, for someone moving to Chicago, your timing is terrible. Luke laughed softly. For someone with a bucket list, you procrastinate too much. Ryan opened his eyes. The fear was still there. The diagnosis was still there. Chicago was still there. But for the first time, none of those things were the only truth in the room. On the chair beside them, the black notebook rested half beneath the wooden box. Number 5 was still waiting. Tell someone the truth. Ryan reached for the pen, crossed it out, and whispered, one left. Luke looked at him. Then we finish it together. Ryan was discharged the following evening with instructions to rest, a new appointment on the calendar, and Luke carrying his bag despite Ryan insisting that possession of functioning arms still qualified him to carry his own socks. By the time they reached Ryan's apartment, Seattle had gone quiet beneath steady rain. Luke set the bag beside the couch and looked toward the door. I can stay out here if you want. Ryan understood immediately. For nearly 10 years, Luke had walked through this apartment like it was partly his. Yet suddenly the distance between the couch and Ryan's bedroom felt like unexplored territory. You mean sleep on the couch? Ryan asked. I mean wherever you are comfortable. Ryan looked at him for a moment. Stay with me. Luke did not joke. Are you sure? No, Ryan admitted. But I am tired of letting fear make every decision. In the bedroom, the awkwardness arrived almost immediately. Ryan stood beside the bed and stared at it. That mattress looked significantly larger yesterday. Luke folded his arms. I can still take the couch. If you mention the couch again, I am adding, learn to accept an invitation to the bucket list. That earned the smile Ryan wanted. They climbed beneath the covers fully dressed for sleep, leaving a careful strip of mattress between them that would have been ridiculous if it had not felt so important. For several minutes, neither spoke. Rain tapped against the windows. Then Luke's voice came softly through the dark. What are you thinking? Ryan stared at the ceiling. That I spent 8 years wanting this and somehow never considered what happens after I get it. You mean sharing a bed? I mean you knowing. His humor faded. I thought the diagnosis was the thing I was most afraid of. It was not. I was more afraid of needing someone and giving them the power to leave. Luke turned toward him. Ryan. I know. Emotionally healthy. Very attractive. Stop. Luke reached across the small space and found his hand beneath the blanket. I cannot promise what happens next year. Neither can you. But I can promise I am not here because I feel sorry for you. Ryan turned his head. Even in the dim room, he could make out Luke's face. Then why are you here? Luke squeezed his hand. Because I love you too. Ryan had imagined hearing those words in 100 impossible versions of his life. None of them had included hospital wristbands, rain, exhaustion, or mismatched pillows. Somehow this version mattered more. He shifted closer and rested his head against Luke's shoulder. Luke's arms settled gently around him. There was no urgency, nothing they needed to prove. They simply stayed there, talking quietly until Ryan's sentences became slower and Luke told him to sleep. For the first time since the diagnosis, Ryan closed his eyes without feeling as though the clock was watching him. When he woke the next morning, pale daylight filled the room. Luke was still beside him, hair flattened on one side, looking so profoundly unromantic that Ryan smiled. Luke opened one eye. Why are you staring? Reconsidering 8 years of poor judgment. Too late. Luke leaned over and kissed him, brief and warm and wonderfully ordinary. That ordinary kiss became the beginning of something neither of them tried to name too quickly. The months that followed were not a miracle montage. Ryan began treatment. Some weeks brought encouraging results. Others brought exhaustion, canceled plans, and fear neither man could joke away. Luke did not abandon Chicago, and Ryan never asked him to. Instead, Luke negotiated with his firm, remaining based in Seattle while traveling for major projects. It was complicated, inconvenient, and entirely his choice. They argued sometimes. Ryan hated being watched when he was tired. Luke hated when Ryan pretended he was fine. They learned the difference between helping and taking over, between protecting someone and denying them a choice. They also learned smaller things. Luke stole blankets. Ryan made terrible pancakes after midnight. And kissing someone you had known for nearly a decade could somehow feel new every time. Then day 366 arrived without permission. Ryan woke before sunrise and stared at the date on his phone until a laugh escaped him. The prognosis had never been an appointment, only an estimate. He was not magically cured. He was simply still here. On the nightstand sat a coffee mug with a note in Luke's handwriting. Rooftop. Bring the camera. Ryan climbed upstairs at an unhurried pace. Luke was waiting beside 2 folding chairs, 2 fresh coffees, the black notebook, and Ryan's camera on a tripod. Seattle stretched behind him beneath a lavender sky. You are late, Luke said. Ryan checked his watch. I survived past an estimated deadline. Punctuality privileges have been permanently revoked. Luke handed him a coffee. The year behind them had contained appointments, difficult results, arguments, laughter, another Mariners game, another trip to Ruby Beach, and hundreds of mornings Ryan once believed he would never see. Luke opened the notebook. Every item had been crossed out except number 12. Take one photograph worth keeping forever. Luke pointed toward the tripod. We finish it today. Ryan immediately objected. I belong behind cameras. Not anymore. Luke set the timer and stepped beside him. Ryan looked toward the lens, suddenly understanding why this frightened him. For years, he had photographed everyone he loved while quietly removing himself from the evidence. He had prepared memories for a future that did not include him. Luke slipped his hand into Ryan's. You do not have to smile. Ryan glanced at him. Good, because your face is ruining the mood. Luke laughed. Ryan laughed too, and the shutter clicked. When they checked the image, Ryan went quiet. Morning light behind them. Luke looking at Ryan instead of the camera. Ryan caught mid-laugh. Their hands joined. Not a farewell. Not proof that Ryan had once existed. Proof that he was living. Ryan crossed out number 12. Done. Luke turned to the final page. Number 13 had waited 366 days. Ryan handed him the pen. You have tortured me long enough. Luke wrote beneath the number and passed the notebook back. Give Ryan something worth staying for. Ryan read it twice. That is painfully sentimental. I had 5 seconds to invent it. You had a year to improve it. Luke smiled. I decided it was accurate. Ryan looked at the words again, then at the man beside him. You know you are not the reason I stayed alive. Luke's smile softened. I know. Good. Ryan closed the notebook. But you are one of the reasons I stopped being afraid to live. Luke's eyes filled, and Ryan kissed him before either of them could hide behind a joke. The kiss was soft, certain, and unhurried. Not a promise that everything would be fine, but a choice to be fully present while it was. When they parted, the sunrise had spread across Seattle. Ryan lifted his camera toward the skyline, then lowered it again. A year earlier, he had believed time was something people owned until somebody told them it was running out. Now he understood that nobody owned it. 12 months, 50 years, tomorrow morning, none of it came with a guarantee. Love could not bargain for more time. It could only teach you not to abandon the time you already had. Luke reached for his hand. Ryan held on. Some moments did not need to be saved for later. Some moments deserved to be lived while they were happening.